Okay, let's see. So I just came back in from giving y'all love, giving eternal unconditional love from the center point of the sphere in this planet, the magnetosphere, the echo chamber, the center of the ecosphere, inner Earth, right? The core, right to the very core of this planet. I connected the very core of what I am, which is eternal, like an eternal sun. It's not like it is an eternal sun. Right? So I'm seeing a big green emerald disc in my third eye. Right? The Emerald Round Table. Emerald Round Table Guardians. And baby blue, there's a baby blue disc there. Right? And more than that, silver and gold, fire. Yeah, so it's pretty amazing stuff when you go out there and with your bare feet on this rock, on this the largest shield volcano. So you realize how deep this baby goes, right? Right. I remember I wanted to go jump in the Moana Loch one afternoon, go dance with her in spirit. Go ask her. That was like in 2019, but my home is on Kauai. That's her flower shop. That is a very special, that's what I call an emerald gemstone. Yeah, it is like the heart of it all. The heart of a girl's heart to generate the most unbelievable purity of energy that you experience through a real goddess, the heart of a goddess, a real goddess, creative goddess, represented by all the flower essences. So when I land on that island and put my feet there, you can smell the fragrance. Okay, your airline of communications, the atmospheres, the ethers, right? You know the essence. Yeah, I never forgot. I know that essence, and that's really what it is. On a spiritual level, as you're experiencing the essence of the spirit, that's what consumes you, right? Is being with that powerful essence of a flower, and that's why hurting something that beautiful, where that essence is that beautiful, to hurt something like that is why I cry so hard and deeply for so long, because that's off limits to a guardian. Okay, which is to hurt the flowers. You know, going into a mother's flower garden and wanting to destroy her garden. That's like saying you want to destroy all of it because you can't control all of it. Oh, wow. I know that hits home. But they know they can't control eternal unconditional love because that is the energy that frees the spirit. That's a dance for freedom. That's a dance of love and joy. They don't experience that. That's why I cry for them so hard. By the things that they do against themselves as a result of what they do to others. And how painful it is to experience that. So you can imagine how that was as a child. How the fuck did I ever get through this? Because you're talking about a planet that's in a free fall. So you're going to do everything that you have to absolutely do not to lose what it is you're aware of that you're giving love to. Or you're not what you say you are. Which is an eternal spiritual being with an oversoul that experiences what I do through my heart at that age and realize so many others. I call it reading baggage. It's like a baggage claim. You know, when you go to an airport and you get off that airline of communication, and you go into the baggage claim, that's baggage. That's stuff held in memory. See? So imagine that all of a sudden one day in the airport, your stuff is gone, and it never comes back to you. How much trauma do you experience as a result of that? That's the matter side of the equation. how much is the matter worth to you, like diamonds, gold, silver, anything that is generated in any planet system. See? So they're inverted. Because that's how they tag and associate their consciousness to the value that it has in energy and frequency of what we generate as the first musicians. That's why it's so, when I was a child, this is an illusion. And the reason for that is because I'm not at war in my own mirror. Eternity is not at war in its own mirror, and it's impossible for that to be experienced. So anything that is less than what that is, which is what I am, which goes on forever, gifting love energy, then I realize, knowing the one from the other that isn't. That means they're losing voltage. I'm not supposed to lose any voltage, ever. That's knowing one from the other. That's being the law of one. So wherever the law of one is, as a single pole, right? The center point of every sphere, the center point of every real star, out of which comes the balance that you experience between poles. So you're always in balance. You know how to balance your waves so that you're in an equal state all the time, which means you're running a clear channel wherever you go. That means you know you're an expert operator of a radio antenna, which means you know how to tune out noise that doesn't belong there. It's creating distortions in a radio set or a radio star network. That's a guardian grade operator. That's a master musician. Has to be. Because that's where the math is. The math has to work. Because the level of precision doesn't make any errors. 0 errors. Go take a look at their tolerances for error, in which geometric form, shape of energy have to fit properly so there's no distortions. That's a very high-level mathematician that knows the physics code on how things are put together automatically, which is to say it naturally is seeking to fit in the function in which it's performing. What is its function? What is the function of water? What is the function of fire? What is the function of water? What is the function of the wind? So there has to be a math function for these things that fit why we experience what we do. So it's always going to be the purity of the air, the purity of all the elements, the purity of everything, actually. And so that's what you experience, is the purity, which is the purity of the light, which is the purity of the heart, which is the purity of the soul. You're experiencing the purity of that love. So that love is, by virtue of really being default, eternal, unconditional love, because it does not require a fee, which means we're the ones that are giving it away. Okay? Don't worry about it. Hang on to what you got. If you're needing to hold on to energy, hold on to what you got because you need it and we don't. That's the difference between uncontrolled and control. Captive versus non-captive. Because love is what frees your spirit. That's what the law is. So they know that because that's eternal light. That's eternal love. That's on fire to give that love away. So that there isn't anybody that is alive and living as a sacred temple of living light, which is living crystal liquid consciousness light, experiences anything less than what we are, which is what you are, that is experiencing a loss of voltage. You're not supposed to experience that because I'm not supposed to experience that. So it began with us. It began with eternal unconditional love that's on fire to give away energy. So you can see how that gets translated when I'm a little boy. When you're dealing with all the programming, the Truman Show set, architects, how they put things together, what they do with technology. Now you're experiencing how they use technology against the one. So what it's doing is it's going to war against itself by virtue of the math that it uses to experience what it is in consciousness, to destroy itself. Ultimately, that's what happens, because the math just will never work correctly in the way in which it comes out of the one. Zero errors. Because it's all about consciousness, because consciousness is energy. So the consciousness knows the truth, knows how to tune a star. Naturally, no effort at all. That's the key. If it's taking you time, that's a problem. You become the master by experiencing being the master naturally without having to think about it, how it works. You are how it works. So there's no delay of knowing what you are and what you're not, which is eternal, unconditional love on fire to give it away. That's how you know. That's how you know one from the other. Somewhere, somebody is losing energy because I'm aware of it. I'm detecting it. Then that means that we're not experiencing, there are beings that are not experiencing eternity. They're not experiencing the primal sound field and light field here. Okay, so that's the pickup. That's a pickup like on the pickup on a guitar. So that's a signal. Remember, signal's intelligence. The antenna is getting the translation. It's informing us of what's wrong. That's an immediate read. So it doesn't take a genius to figure that out, because it's being the law of least effort. And that's what makes the law simple to experience and know the difference. Right? Water does not like to be held back from distributing more love. Okay? So that wherever you go, there's plenty of water, of pure spirit that powers you up right away simply by drinking it. You already know that, but when you drink it, wow, what a charge. See? So anything that represents being able to remember who you are, don't want to remember who you are. We don't want you to remember who you are. See? They didn't want the star in daddy's eyes or mama's eyes of what's possible. This is what's possible. To create natural guardians. To protect the all creation, right? Naturally. So I always knew that as a child. For those that I shared these videos with, it's living through your heart. I knew that at 4 years of age, and somewhere along the way, I received some training through experiential learning. The critical importance when you're in a fallen system that the heart shield is always up immediately, because that's the first thing they want to take down. And I know, being that young, at that child, when that shield goes up, that means, and this is, I take no pleasure in saying this, but it means trust no one. Even though you know that you implicitly trust what it is that you are in energy, because you have a primal sound and light field connection. So you know that you're connected, okay, to those that are. Those are, everything is a relative to me when you're giving love to all creation. But you know what you're connected to. Like, I've used the term safe zones. Because by virtue of knowing what you are, the connection that you have with the source, I call that home base. So Kauai is home base. But home base for me, when I was a child, I simply said the center point of my heart, which is my soul, and my spirit that is integrated. Okay, so that simply means that's eternal fire, which is the eternal spirit that is in that light that is purified, because that's a purified heart, which means you can't fake being that kind of love. Okay, they feel it. They know they're being loved, and boy, they love that energy when they need to be healed, right? So a girl knows how to do that has healed herself, same way that a boy knows how to do that when a boy has healed himself, because they're one. They become one. They experience being one with all creation. They're gifting love too. They realize it has nothing really to do with gender, does it? It's about being the biggest badass nuclear blast force. Yeah, the core, the center of a star, the very core, the consciousness core. Great balls of fire, huh? I grew up with those folks as a kid, listening to all their pianos and violins and guitars and drums and how all this everything was code. Reading all the codes, reading all the DNA codes of the consciousness that is generating the codes, which represent the images that they're projecting. See, they choose the consciousness that is generating what you now perceive in your mirror is the consciousness that it's like saying, who wants to experience that? I'm not what that is. Would I want to hold that image by how it's defined in energy, the purpose and function of that image, based on the math and the codes in which it's being presented as language, DNA language consciousness? That's not who we are. So I realized as a child, the most important thing when you live through your heart is I sort of, the way we metaphorically use allegories or to tell stories of what we experience, because experience is the teacher, the result, and the use of our energy. So we share the stories, right? Teachers that are storytellers. They've managed to survive places. In this case, that's what it would actually be. That's why I have these images sometimes of being a mother and being aware of what I've experienced here from the time I was a child, communicating to another child as to whether or not you want to communicate that by virtue of it being held in memory. Because then if it's held in memory and you're aware of that and you're communicating to a child, you don't want to communicate something that, even though it's the truth, you don't want to lower their frequency by what they become aware of what you're aware of. Now they become aware of what you're aware of in your library by those images. I don't want to transfer that image based on those math codes into that other child's memory bank. Do I? Because now it becomes aware of something that isn't what love is. So if the child knows that you are what love is and they're experiencing eternal unconditional love through your heart and soul, then if that's how it's always been, then that means that child will not experience anything less than what that is. Now it knows that the form from which it all began in creation spheres is experiencing eternity, the same eternity that we're experiencing, our children are experiencing. They have the right to experience that because that's what you are. You're running on eternal energy, so therefore your children are inherently entitled to that. Because otherwise they wouldn't experience that if you're the one that's the creator of that. Right? So they're experiencing their parents. The mother and the father joined as one. I'm experiencing being loved eternally, forever and always. So that means that you will always love me. Yes, no matter where you're from. I could meet you for a day and write you a love letter and say, I will always love you. Okay? But now we're into attachments, which is like the guy in the window that I mentioned, which means you can look out at a flower and realize how beautiful she is, right? Without wanting to hold it captive as a source of energy. See? So you can see how that would play down here in this level of creation, the way the Truman Show is set up, when that's how you experience being that with everything that is alive and living in nature. So that would be, if you wanted to try and translate that in a sexual reproductive way, to reproduce another software system in which a soul and a spirit can jump into and experience this realm, right? You'd be wanting to make love to every girl on the planet, right? So this is all about atom seed, crystal atom seeds, and how many don't carry that as a result of what's happened. So they're not experiencing the primal light and sound field. So don't you think it would be an intelligent idea to be sending crystal atom seeds, right? So they have that connection from which it all began, right? A one code, if you will, right? Because if it began with that, and that's eternity, then everything that comes out of eternity ought to be able to experience eternity, you think? I think that's a very high level of intelligence, because the math ought to work to be able to do that. Because the last thing I knew when I was a child growing up, I could not stand to experience any loss of voltage in anything. It didn't matter what it is. I would experience trauma. Okay, so I'm not sadomasochistic. So I realized that experiencing that isn't myself wanting to blow holes in my own nuclear power, using my nuclear power generator to blow holes in my own field. Okay, but I'm experiencing them doing it. Wait, who's doing this? So now that becomes a planetary read of loss and gain of electrons, and the source from which now we're back to the source. You know, like the origin of creation came out of eternal unconditional love. Okay, so now you're scanning the battlefield of who's who, right? So it's an energetic read. It's not what you look like. It's experiencing the energy that you're running as consciousness. It's the kind of energy that you run. And the use of that, what that energy does, which is the consciousness. You're reading the consciousness. The nature of that consciousness, what it does with its energy. Is it destructive? It's really what it is. How destructive is it? And that's when you get into, they don't know what they're doing. They're not running the right math, is really what it is. Okay? The math has to work. And that is why being androgynous is an eternal gift. It's an eternal blessing. And I cry so much because of that. Because you realize that you have a gift that I've experienced throughout my life since I was a little child. Sometimes it's like, how the fuck did I even get through this? Because the energy is so oppressive. You know, I call it a vice. A vice on consciousness is not wanting to expand, which means the energy doesn't want to expand. Okay? And wish to expand consciousness, to experience more love, to experience being loved. So now you're into the quantification of trauma, if you want to do it that way, in units of energy that represent density. How dense is it? Right? Raising consciousness, electrical density consciousness. That's why so many of these places that I went to, particularly in large population areas of 15, 16 million people, it's like, holy shit, imagine raising. So they're experiencing the primal light sound field in every one of those batteries down there. Every one of those software operating systems, right? So that's why I went up to the top, was up in the San Gabriel Mountains between the San Bernardino National Forest and over towards La Cañada or Pasadena off the 210 freeway. There's that. It's a beautiful mountain range. Actually, the whole thing. I spent a lot of time there. And so I went up there. That's where I ran into a guy from the Amazon, an Amazonian Indian, right? Just an Amazonian, a beautiful being who was with a Palladian. And he had some stuff that he brought up from the Amazon basin. Thank you very much. Hey, so I headed up Highway 2, and you could see, and there was a lady there from Los Angeles County that was with another group, and they do contract work up there on behalf of the U.S. Forest Service. So having worked there and been there in 72 and 73, working on a 20 and a 30-man firefighting crew, you know, you're reading the terrain on how alive is it, right? And so when I was there in 772 and what it was like to be up there now, even though there isn't any real microwave towers up there where you can't get a signal up there. And so, but my antenna will pick it up what it feels like. What does it feel like in my heart and soul magnetically? What does it feel like? So I was experiencing a large loss of life, energy. In other words, you could almost think of it as, doing a bird count, or a squirrel count, a bear count, units of energy that used to be there and were thriving. And then you're experiencing a loss over time. Their ability to reproduce successfully, to maintain a certain level of population in the habitat in which they are, if you will, accustomed to operating in by virtue of what they are, the codes that they run. And so that's why I love the blue jays that were there all the time. But I moseyed on up past where I worked at Chileo and stopped in some mountains there where I met the Amazon guy and his girlfriend, Palladian girlfriend. And then went on up the road that goes towards San Bernardino or El Cajon Pass, which is Mojave Desert. So when you get up there around 9,000 feet, you get a very beautiful view of everything going north up to the High Sierra towards Tehachapi, which would be across Mojave where Edwards Air Force Base and all that. And on this particular day, it was clear. And then that would be southbound as well, like looking all the way down to San Diego to the south, and then looking eastbound out to the Pacific Ocean and working with the sun and doing the same thing I do here on the rock, right? And it's to raise the state of consciousness, expand, heal every cell, every molecule, every circuit, from the core of this planet, right, to the core of every sphere that is experiencing eternal unconditional love, and pushing it, streaming it, just pushing it through all the circuits, the motherboard. Give it all away, right, with the sun. And so that's where I was doing that over in a place called Wrightwood. And if you look at a topographical map of that, you can see how the canyons, the flow of the energy goes, being at a higher elevation, which is altitude density, right? Airlines of communication. And then pushing it out across the basin. I was working the whole Southern California basin, which goes from, say, Malibu on the Pacific coast, right, West Coast, all the way across all that area where all those beings live. All the way, say, to what's known as the Inland Empire, or San Bernardino and Palm Springs, and then everything southbound into Mexico, right? Just let it flow. Just let it flow across the currents. Bring the currents in. Bring the currents in. So their antennas are picking it up. So their antennas are picking it up. So their antennas are picking it up. Right? Pulling it. It comes right through the sun. Mirrored stuff. Right? And so that was, I almost went down, thought I might go down into the, I'm having greater difficulty being in denser populations, as you can imagine, but that's why I do that, is to loosen them up, right? Sing and dance, play some music, come together, right? Instead of the way the polarity game works, and time and energy, and how those relate to numbers, right? Between the loss and gain, sucking machines, right? And then power generating machines or transmutation machines, right? That are clearing debris fields. That's what it is. Clearing DNA debris fields. That's the work that a polarity integrator does. Is so you're running a clear channel. There's no distortions in the waves. Garble. That's what it is. It's garble. Ask any AWACS guy what garble is. Okay. We're not getting a signal, Lieutenant. It's all garble. That's because you're not supposed to get that signal. It's garbling, right? While they were pushing chaff in Vietnam, right? Why they went from glass bottles and beer and soda pop, right, to aluminum, right? Why they went from more wool-based clothing, right, natural fibers, trinary stuff, and instead pushing polymers that On my dad's side of the family would be my aunt who married Walsby Carruthers, who worked for DuPont, who, according to what's in the Wiki encyclopedia, he invented nylon for DuPont, worked with DuPont, working with polymers and all that. So now all of a sudden you see them, everything is all about money and making energy and essentially killing people off in which to do that. So that's the polarity game, loss and gain. Minus this, minus units of energy, and the rate at which you're losing energy. So that's a big black hole sucking machine. They're chasing electrons. So measure that across the planetary consciousness terrain, right? So it's pretty easy to identify, what's what. When I mentioned that when I was a child, trust no one. And the reason of that is the history speaks for itself. Okay, right? We all know this. And that's called honoring your agreements. Okay, so you know what the highest code of honor is, right? The highest superconductor code of honor is what love is. The highest accelerator of gifting love energy. So the math speaks for itself because that's what love is. That means that the music is in harmony, which means the math is in harmony. The math works. So the geometric stuff works. It fits. That's going with the flow. So you measure the flow of energy between loss and gain. How much are we losing? And what is the rate at which you're losing it when it's in a free fall state? And how that resistance is played out between resistors and capacitors, those that have the capacity to give and those that don't. And the torque differential speed between the two. That's your polarization game. I call it an AI numbers game because the numbers don't lie. That's the math and geometry of it in energy units. Consciousness. Complex number space. Even and odd numbers. How that works with geometrical sound and light patterns of behavior, the behavior of the consciousness. Balance. When you're in balance, that's called the water worlds are in a state of peace. There is no turbulence, which means there are no broken arrows. That means you're running a perfect compass. That's your vertical and horizontal stabilizers, huh? And a gyrodome? Yeah, fuck yeah, running a good gyroscope, baby. I know. It's that's for you, Conjoy. You are quite welcome. I try and get a feel because that's what it is, because we're all connected on what you're experiencing, and what you're experiencing, or if you will, what you're sharing with me is really what we're all learning through each other by having a relationship with each other, because we're communicating with each other. Now I become aware of what you're aware of. You become aware of what I am aware of, right? So I know why I'm here, okay? So when I get to know you and you get to know me, it's always going to start with what love is, because that's what it began with. That's what I am, okay? So now you know who I am. So the virtue on how this works with trust issues is a word in the English language called consistency. Are you speaking a consistent language that we can understand because there's no distortions in your radio set? Yes. That means that it's probably a good probability on the quantum probability side of things that this person is who they really are. You're experiencing who they really are. There is no fakery going on here. There's no masquerade. This guy is who he says he is. Okay. So that means there's no mistaken identity. That's right. There's no mistaken identity. So now when you get into the stealth code side of things, you can see, oh, but, right? And that's called learning speed. How fast we're learning, which is spiritual and soul growth development. right? Yep. Learning through the first magicians. The original sound. Do, 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 do. Right? I love vibration. That is so cool, and it just it warms my heart because it's you just gotta laugh at it. But when you think of the precision of this kind of stuff, it gets ridiculous because you could make a different choice at some point in your life, and the outcome could be different than another one. That's self-explanatory. So how does it work out that I'm in Reno, Nevada, and I choose on a particular morning to get up at a particular time and then choose to do my laundry and then choose to get on a particular bus at a particular time in order to get to a particular spot on Virginia Avenue in downtown, not really downtown Reno, Nevada, but moving forward down towards, the Truman Show set, and just like Vegas and Reno, the gambling casinos, playing number games, in which you're going to lose against an AI that's basically what you're doing when you go into a casino. You're playing a game with artificial intelligence. That's a numbers game you're in now. Now we're back to quantum probability, right? Of mapping repetitive behaviors using your consciousness in which to do it. So it's gaming for your mind, soul's energy. Suck it right down a hole. So you got to know the difference between one and the other, or if you will, a metatronic reversal current, and what you are in current. Okay? So now we're back to currency. Currency in the numbers, right? So when you already know as a child, you're map reading what that money means in codes. This is a source. This is not the source of origin. I know what the source of origin is. This is not the source of origin. That's spelled money. Math doesn't work with that. Right? So, Joker's wild is what I say. So you see how this works through their side of polarity, right? Chasing electrons. That's the fallen motherboard. That's a board that is going down. Motherboard that's going down. It's become corrupted because the grid doesn't work. The grid's all fucked up. The lines of communication are all messed up. Right? There's too many mutations. There's too many blockages. Circulate. It's just a mess. It's another word that I used to use when I was growing up was what you call convoluted or a clusterfuck. You know what a clusterfuck is, right? Okay, so you realize that all these folks in these academic communities that are pushing all this shit don't know what the fuck they're doing. And the evidence of that is what they produce and generate out of their schools. Because now you experience the byproduct of their consciousness. Okay? That's what it is. That's a map read of what they'd use their energy for to experience. So when you throw free will into that, and I'm a small child, I realize there's who you are and who I am. Hey, if I'm free will, then I'm giving you free will too, because now you're experiencing being free around me because I'm not going to put a lasso around you. Which means I'm not seeking to do you any harm. Okay? No matter who you are. Otherwise, I'm doing harm to me. So I'm not going to put a lasso around you. Okay? But we can have fun with that, depending on the level you operate at. Particularly if you're androgynous and you're with another androgynous being. Now you're on fire, being together on fire. That's like two heart shields connected. No matter where we go, we know where each other are at. So we're protecting each other and our children because now we're at the center point of every star. Okay, so that's why I love Michelle Martin when she put up there on her description a biohacker. Okay, so It's a natural state of knowing how. Let's put it this way. It's why, like when I was a child, it was please do not insult my intelligence, because the last thing I want to do is to use my energy the way that you do. And that's really what it is when you understand what an inverter is in electrical engineering. Okay? So there has to be a cap, you know, what we used to call a scientist cap, because spiritual science is mathematics and physics. Absolutely. That's why the Vatican banned spirit out of the natural sciences. If you look at the history that Karen Ann MacDonald with her documents had put up to strip their title to operate here anymore, the way it was set up with the clan mothers and all that, what happened in 408 AD, when the Roman Empire went down, their title was stripped, right? Got sold back to them during what's known as the Columbia Exchange, which would have been Columbus. Then they hit the dirt again, just like they do at D-Day in 44, June 6th. All the numbers are correlated between the polarities, between loss and gain. And that includes every species here. Okay? So that's why I cry for them. Cry for everything here that's ever lost energy as a result of being in a black hole system, experiencing, I should say, a black hole system. So that means grid workers have to come in here that have codes in order to do the work, in order to fix something that's broken. Right? Okay, so that's essentially grid work, guardian work that we do on behalf of all creation. And that's why it's sort of unusual for me when I think of commissions or soul contracts. And I have been through an enormous amount of training, but what I remember from my memory is I'm a trainer. You know, a music instructor. Okay. That's what it is. How to work with light. How to work with living light. You are living light. Right? So in this case, it's all about, as she said, transmutation machines. Yes. That's because you know how to tune a radio star. Because you're in perfect balance. The water world's from perfect balance. The purity of the realm, which is the purity of the consciousness. It's the purity of the energy. It's really what it is, the purity of the energy. Experience the essence of a goddess, the purity of her energy. The gifts that come from that energy that are natural to gift away. That's why it's very difficult for me to charge anybody for anything that I ever generate, right? Like creating something, like if I decided that I was going to save some money and buy some tools and go into the wood shop business, or go into the furniture business and making custom furniture or what have you, you know, because you're multitasked, you can pretty much, you've learned how to do so many different skills at such a high rate of speed. But if you wanted to earn money, that's easy to do. And a gazillion different occupations you can choose to do to use your consciousness as creative energy, if you will, to simulate something, which is really voc-ed, to generate an artifact that came out of something that was alive and living at one time, like sentient trees. So you can see how I was translating the environment here in a fallen system when I'm 4 years of age, translating all this across the terrain. Planetary consciousness terrain, loss and gain, you know, harvesting trees, harvesting everything. Everything is a source of energy from which to take energy, right? Everything is a battery. Everything is energy, right? So in other words, it's indiscriminate in the application of that consciousness, which is energy, to suck energy out of everything. I call it a vacuum cleaner, you know. It's one big, remember what was his name during the Reagan era? The guy who was the head bean counter for the Reagan administration, Stockman, I believe his name was. Remember that? The terminology that he came to, remember he talked about the big sucking sound? Sounds that suck. Remember the old saying growing up? Hey, that sucks. Suction cups, right? Have a good day. Be good to yourselves. I love you too, Conjoy. I love you too. I love you too. I love you too. I love you too. I'm sending you flower fragrances.